Lord Vindican, Master to Darth Malgus, Inquisitor of the Old Empire, and Bocas'eca, follower of Jerec, unhinged Dark Jedi. Considered bit players in the great events of their respective eras, they were nonetheless impactful. If these two lesser-known figures in galactic history ever met on the battlefield, who would win? Lord Vindican's chosen fighting style is unspecified, though based on his observed technique, I believe him to be a specialist in Xian, the classical variant of the Perseverance form. Armed with a saber staff of standard design for the Sith of his era, Vindican was a very conservative fighter. His style was very technique-oriented, based around a tight sequence of attacks and parries combined with nimble footwork and full-body spins required to maneuver his weapon. His approach was aggressive but cautious, keeping up the pressure without leaving himself exposed. He will break off attacks to defend himself, sometimes to the point where he is only defending, but he will never stop advancing. Bocas'eca's character sheet presented on the article Dark Forces Part 4 of the Crudest Matter confirmed him as a master of Nyman, the moderation form. He was armed with an unusual set of conjoining lightsabers. Rather than linking at the pommels to become a saber staff, the two hilts connected side to side, giving the impression that he was carrying an exceptionally thick standard lightsaber. As specifically noted in the article, this weapon enabled a treacherous fighting style based around surprising adversaries with sudden shifts in technique. One moment he is awkwardly flailing at you, the next he is executing a gracefully elaborate attack sequence, and the entire time he's jumping around like a toddler on a sugar high. Despite the logistical advantage that dual blades have over saber staffs, Vindican has proven that he can effectively combat this weapon set, taking an offensive stance against a Jedi Battlemaster employing Jerec. However, Boc's approach was based around surprising his opponents with sudden style shifts, a tactic that is proven moderately effective against Vindican. That being said, Vindican has rallied from these setbacks, standing his ground and defending while coming up with a new plan of attack. Vindican was only overcome by a radically unorthodox attack enabled by an unusual weapon set in the hands of a Jedi Battlemaster. As wild and unconventional as Boc is, he's not bringing on anything that far out of left field. Furthermore, Boc's defense was just as inconsistent as his offense, which left him vulnerable against well-placed counters, as proven in his brief exchange with Kuran. Bocas'eca's approach to combat was based around off-balancing and overwhelming the opposition with clever tricks and savage aggression, where Vindican's approach was based around maintaining his composure and keeping up the pressure no matter what. Lord Vindican was a male Sith pureblood, likely middle-aged. Originally native to Korriban, though Vindican was likely born on Dromund Kaas, purebloods were distinguished by deep red skin, eyebrow stalks composed of cartilage, a set of facial tendrils that hung down from their cheekbones, and sharp bone spurs protruding from their brow and various limb joints. In regards to their capabilities and performance levels, they were noted for their greater-than-human resiliency, though they were otherwise comparable. Vindican demonstrated a high tolerance for pain when he shrugged off a lightsaber strike to the face, and I think it was quite obvious that, had he not been executed by Malgus, he would have survived the stab wound administered by Kaosen Darach. Bocas'eca was a male twi'lek, also likely to be middle-aged. Native to Ryloth, the twi'lek were primarily distinguished by their twin head tails, called leku. Composed entirely of brain tissue and nerve endings, leku served a variety of physiological and cultural purposes, though they tended to be a liability in battle. Highly sensitive to touch, grabbing them forcefully tended to cause debilitating pain, though given Boc's insanity, I think he could endure the pain, if not enjoy it. Otherwise, twi'leks were directly on par with humans in their physical performance levels. Boc in particular demonstrated exceptional agility and ambidexterity. The most relevant factor in this arena is resiliency. While Boc's insanity points to a high tolerance for pain, his physical ability to withstand and power through injury is outstripped by Vindican's. This disparity is best demonstrated by the common means through which both were dispatched: impalement. When stabbed in the gut by Caosen Durach, Vindican was disabled but alive, and as already noted, likely would have survived. Boc, on the other hand, was slain when Katarn impaled him with a telekinetic spear. While Boc's superior agility is an advantage, it isn't a game breaker, as Vindican proved that he can keep pace with more nimble opponents, pivoting and maneuvering quickly enough to keep them in his crosshairs. Where Boc relies on evasion to avoid taking a hit, Vindican's more balanced use of his attributes allows him to counter this, keeping pace while shrugging off hits, maintaining a consistent performance level no matter what is thrown at him. As a Sith Inquisitor, Vindican was a dedicated Force wielder, demonstrating particular skill with Force lightning. Vindican typically used carefully timed bursts to stagger and disable individual enemies, though his lightning was powerful enough to cause visible damage to the exterior hull of the Redshifter. His use of telekinesis appeared to be specialized towards defense, shown when he used a powerful Force shield to block a rocket-propelled grenade. However, Vindican did have his shortcomings. His passive telekinetic defenses were not perfect, and while he was quick on the draw with lightning, he wasn't very good at integrating it into lightsaber combat, typically telegraphing the action. Under Jerec, Bocas'eca trained as a dark side marauder, a combat specialist who channeled rage and bloodlust. Accordingly, he favored offensive powers, the most notable being Force destruction, a specialized application of telekinesis that manifested as a glowing red ball of energy. Force destruction would either kill targets outright or leave them paralyzed. Boc was also a master of various mental powers, demonstrating an early mastery of psychokinesis and making use of Force concealment, Force fear, and paralyzing mind tricks. Though the Of the Crudest Matter article credits Boc with moderate Force defenses, I'm of the opinion that he's lacking in this area, as he is an ambush predator who overwhelms through shock and surprise, building his defense around evasion. Addressing Boc's use of telepathic powers, I don't see them as being particularly effective against Vindican. As a Great Galactic War-era Sith Inquisitor, Vindican's primary adversaries were other Inquisitors, who heavily favored the sort of mind-altering powers that Boc employed, so if Vindican didn't have some way to deal with them, he wouldn't have lived long enough to be defeated by Caosen Durach. Furthermore, while Boc did use Force concealment to ambush Kyle Katarn, he only used his offensive telepathic abilities to disable non-Force wielders, which suggests that he is at the very least apprehensive about his ability to influence trained adepts in this manner. Addressing their direct offensive powers, Vindican could almost certainly defend against Force destruction, as Force shields were one of the effective countermeasures against destruction, and Vindicans could block an RPG. Boc, on the other hand, is vulnerable against Vindican's lightning, his only defense being to absorb the bolts with his lightsabers. Furthermore, Jerec proved that Force destruction was best leveraged in close combat in order to catch opponents off guard, a tactic that would be effective against Vindican, but Boc doesn't do this, employing it purely as a ranged ability. Bocas'eca is easily the more versatile of the pair, but as in all other areas, his lack of consistency is his downfall, particularly against an opponent as consistently opportunistic as Lord Vindican. Jedi Master Ku Ron described Bocas'eca as a crude individual who lacked tact and teeth, an assessment that was both true and false. Bok was arguably the most dangerous member of Jerec's posse, but he was just as much a danger to himself as to others due to his insanity. His greatest strength and weakness was his inconsistency, which made him very difficult to engage, but also left him vulnerable to retaliation. He was an ambush predator who relied on his ability to off-balance and overwhelm through total unpredictability and sheer, unadulterated crazy. And that shit ain't gonna fly against Lord Vindican. While Vindican was ultimately taken down by sudden style shifts, the critical difference is that Chaos and Darach used these alternating attack patterns to bypass Vindican's defenses and score hits, where Bok wants to get his opponent reeling backwards in bewilderment. Darach was opportunistic, where Bok is merely random, and Vindican's tight and consistent defense is the perfect answer for that form of attack, and his tight and consistent counters perfectly exploit Bok's unreliably random defense. And ironically for a Nyman specialist, Bok's position is further weakened by his failure to fully leverage his force abilities. My projection for how this fight would play out is fairly simple and straightforward. They would engage in lightsaber combat, Bok would open with his single-bladed style, and Vindican would not only capably defend, but retaliate, just as he did against Darach. In response, Bok would escalate, separating his weapons and attacking Vindican with Jarkai. Vindican would be forced to assume a purely defensive posture while he adapted, but he would quickly regain the offensive. In order to better combat Bok, Vindican would start breaking out the lightning, and though Bok would likely be able to intercept the bolts with his lightsabers, his ability to defend is undermined by his heavy acrobatic style, and he would be blasted out of the air, likely more than once. Bok would retaliate with force destruction, but the fact that he only uses it at range means that Vindican would be able to raise his force shield. The fight would continue on in this fashion for some time, intense bouts of lightsaber combat, with one or both combatants retreating and blasting the opponent with the force until someone made an error. And that someone would almost certainly be Bocas'eca. His wild offensive isn't unorthodox enough to bewilder Vindican, and his defenses are too inconsistent to reliably fend off the Sith Master's steadfast advance. And for this reason, I declare Lord Vindican the victor.